Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Soul Sessions with KK. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce Rachel Hercman. Rachel Hercman is a psychotherapist who specializes in relationships, sexual health, and trauma. She's the clinical director of the Layers Project magazine, and she'll tell you more about that in the interview. And she is passionate about utilizing social media for community building and removing stigma in order to expand conversation and the way we connect with each other. Rachel, thank you for being on the show.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Rachel, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? Who are you and what do you do?
Okay. So I am a social worker. I'm an LCSW, so licensed clinical social worker. I have a private practice on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, but for now I am exclusively on Zoom. And I really enjoy my work. I work with individuals and couples, and I do trainings for professionals and rabbis and communities. Before the pandemic, I traveled across to different communities in America to speak about relationships and sexuality. So I really enjoy the communal aspect of creating conversations, and I've really appreciated the opportunities as well on social media to find ways for us to have these important conversations as well.
Beautiful. I noticed that since the pandemic started, you started an IGTV series called Hump. Yes, I love the name. Hump Day Health.
Yep.
Yes, and it's primarily about sex and relationships, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I was really scared of videos for a while. I mean, I feel like I was kind of a late bloomer with getting comfortable posting videos on social media. Public speaking in person, I was fine. Something about making videos, something about talking to myself on a phone, because it's so much more like right now we're talking, this feels okay. But the idea of like setting up a phone and talking to myself just felt very weird. And it was like the end of April. At that point, I think it had been, 7-8 weeks. I don't think I gotten dressed like in real clothes in like 7 or 8 weeks. And I started to get to that place where I was like, I need a and I think it just kind of, I got to that point of like, okay, like, why don't I just start doing these videos once a week where I talk about an idea or I talk about some relationship idea or start talking about sex or whatever it is. And it forced me to get dressed once a week. And and I didn't know how long I was going to keep doing it for, but here we are in October, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from people in terms of just that there's something about creating bite-sized ideas and videos for people that, there's only so long we're going to sit and watch something, and just be able to watch a video, think of a relationship concept in a different way, get to know ourselves, become more self-aware. So that's how Hump Day Health started.
Beautiful. And what made you pick sex and relationships? That's what you specialize in as a psychotherapist?
Yeah. Relationships and sex and trauma. Those kind of, I find when someone calls for help, I find there's usually one of those three is pretty charged, usually feeling stuck in some way. I also find that relationships, sex, and trauma have a way of, like your life could look great on paper, and it could be great in many ways. But when people are struggling with their relationships, with their sex lives, when people have trauma that they haven't worked out, you could have the best life on paper. Things could look amazing on the outside, but internally, it's very difficult to feel present and feel joy. So I find that those things are at the heart of people's vibrancy, their ability to feel vibrant in their lives. And I find that when we could work on those things and find healing and resolution with those things, it can affect everything else in their lives as well.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Rachel, let's talk about the singles in our community.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many topics I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
We can go on.
I feel like we could stay up all night talking.
Oh, 100%. And there's many topics that you covered in your IGTV series. But I want to focus on singles because this is something I had not covered on my show yet.
Okay.
So what do you believe are some of the biggest challenges that are facing singles today?
Okay. So a couple of things. When I think of single adults in the Jewish community, so a few things I would first throw out there is, number one, some of these challenges are challenges that we have outside the Jewish dating world as well, and are not exclusively a Jewish problem or Jewish issue. And then the other piece I was going to say is we have issues right now because of the pandemic, but we had a lot of issues even before the pandemic. And I think the pandemic has created issues and it has amplified old ones. It's created new ones and it's amplified old ones. And what's unfortunate, I think, for single adults in the Jewish community is that many people in our communities feel very isolated in general, not being married. Our communities are very family oriented, very family oriented. Even, I mean, when you look at America, there's a few pockets of communities where you can have single adults living all together and that's normal. But your average Jewish Orthodox suburban community is pretty family oriented. And so just our whole structural, like our communities are just very family oriented. So now in the pandemic, you know, we're looking at isolation on a totally different scale for so many people. I mean, even just like, I always say this, like in jail, solitary confinement is a punishment because that's a form of torture. And we have people that's been their reality for months, and that was their reality for months and years, even before the pandemic. But when we talk about some of the issues in our community, so it's like, where do we even start? Well, from the time someone is born, we're already wishing, you know, that they should grow up. What do we say? La Torah, la chopa, la ma'asim tovim, right? So like, it's already like from the very beginning, we're already talking about their wedding and they're a newborn. And from the time people are young, and listen, there's something beautiful about having a family oriented culture. There's something really nice about having family supports. But what ends up happening for many single adults, I find, is where we're at right now is, okay, so it's like, it's hard to separate that we're in a pandemic right now. So if we really want to talk about what's happening right now, like, you want to talk about what's happening right now for singles, or?
Yeah. You know what?
Okay.
Because we are in the right now.
Because we are in it.
Right
and
now.
like
Yeah.
the previous, and like 8 months ago was 8 months ago. So we're just going to talk about right now. Okay. So
Yeah.
number one, most people right now can only date on Zoom. Okay. And it's incredibly challenging. And what's even more challenging is that people on the outside who don't know what it's like to be single will actually say to people like, oh, but like you could date on Zoom. Like, isn't that great? And when you think about the experience of what it's like to meet someone in person and be able to even just to sit on a park bench with someone versus talking to them on Zoom. I mean, even just something I was thinking about on Zoom, you don't get to see how the person interacts with the waiter. You don't get to see what they're like when you're sitting in traffic, or when you get to the mini golf place and it starts pouring and it's really frustrating, or right. In terms of seeing people like as they relate to life on life's terms, we don't have that right now if we're just dating on Zoom. And so that creates a lot of challenges for people. Also, it puts so much pressure on conversation itself, right? If you're able to go out, there's this, you know, there's the two of you and this third thing. You could be watching,
Right.
you know, be in a park, you could be playing a game, even in a restaurant, there's food. Like Zoom, it's like, right? So that's for now, for a lot of couples, a lot of people who want to date, like this is the only option. The other pressures are like this. I mean, right now people are pretty much relying, or a lot of relying on matchmakers. And I find that when you're relying on matchmakers, people tend to be categorized into a box. And I find it's very hard to sum up people. You know, I think that people these days are so much more hashkafically fluid and complex. And they grew up in this kind of home, but they went to these kinds of schools, and they studied at this type of yeshiva, and then they got really religious when they were 21. Now they're in their late 20s and they're like not religious, but they want to have a religious home, and they want someone who went to this kind of school 15 years ago, like this whole thing, and this is what they want to do inside their house, and this is what they want to do outside their house, and this is what they do when they do when this is what they want to do when they have kids one day, like, right? And so I think people are just a lot more complex now, and we're also exposed to a lot more ideas. So I think that, like, I have a text message, so I don't know if that comes up on your thing, whatever.
No, it doesn't.
But people are just like a lot more complex, and we're trying to put people in these boxes. And I think that is a challenge. I think that because people can't meet naturally, it's very different. The analogy I use is, like, think about like catalog shopping versus, like, if you shop from a catalog, you buy something from a catalog, like, it will ask you for every measurement of every part of your body. Okay. And when that thing shows up in the mail and you try it on, you hope and expect that it's going to be like to a T, because it's like all your measurements, right?
Right.
But what happens when you're walking down the street and you go into a store and you just see this thing, it's on a hanger, and you're just like, all right, I'm gonna try it on, right? Yeah. And you're like, this is great, right? And you wouldn't even necessarily pick that out, or even while I was on the hang, right? So we lose that right now, that we can't have like organic, natural meeting.
What about the people who are not choosing to do the Zoom dating and they're breaking the rules? How is it a challenge for them?
What do you mean?
I mean, I don't think
you're saying no, you're right. Not everyone is doing Zoom dating. That's true. Yeah. So, like, in terms of just dating in general. So a couple of things. I think some of the challenges I see for people is that because the Jewish world, we don't have 6 degrees of separation. We have like 1 or 2. I mean, even Karen, we just sat down and like figured out like all these overlaps in like so many ways.
We have so many.
We could probably keep going, and we've never met before, right?
Exactly.
So in the Jewish world, I say we have like 1 or 2 degrees of separation. And there could be something beautiful about that we could take care of ourselves in various ways. But here's one of the downsides. What I find is that if I had to pick like one statement that I think is like the most responsible for shidduchim not happening, it's the sentence, I don't see it. Okay. Wow. You want to set up, let's say you have an idea to set someone up and they're like, oh, okay. And what do? They call one of their friends who's a mutual friend, which, by the way, with social media now, you can easily see who are all your mutual friends with this possible person you'll get set up with. So besides the fact that you could stalk them on social media and look at all their pictures and decide if you're into them or not, even if, let's say, you're like, okay, I want to go out with them, you start, going through your mutual friends and you ask them, what do you guys think? And they say, I don't see it. Okay. Once someone tells you, I don't see it, it's like, that's it. Yeah. The idea dies. And my response to that is like, if we were such experts on seeing it, we wouldn't have this problem, because we would just know who should be together.
Right.
Right. And so
you see the sentiment also from singles themselves when they're like, I don't see it.
Right away.
Just based on looking at a picture.
Right. And so I think that's, that sentence of the sense of authority from other people. Because when someone calls you and says, like, someone wants to set me up with this person, what do you think? So are they asking you, like, they want to hear about this person? They want your approval? It's kind of like Amazon, you're more likely to buy a product that has 500 perfect 5-star reviews then how about this? What if you see something on Amazon and there's no reviews?
Right.
You're like, this is sketch. I don't know if I should buy this product. Right. So what if someone wants to set you up with someone, but no one knows them? It's like, oh, that's so sketchy. Right.
Yeah, totally.
So I think that is a big issue why I think such a small percentage of dating ideas actually become a first date, because there's so much time of researching and asking and this, and everyone's like, I don't see it. So then like, they don't go out. And I think that it's a shame, because I think that I'm not saying we have to go out with every single person. You know, there are people that could be presented to you where you're like, you know what, we want really different things, and I really don't think this is the right fit for whatever reasons. Or I've gotten to know this person in other contexts, and I'm not interested in going on a date with it. Like, but at the same time, though, I think that there are many dates that don't happen because one person said, I don't see it.
Mm-hmm. So do you think people should avoid asking their friends and family members and people they trust?
I'm not saying people shouldn't ask. You can ask if you want. But if someone's going to, instead of saying, I don't see it, if you have like a legit concern, or if you're like, oh, maybe it's like maybe it's a religious, a dramatically religious difference. So you're like, that's why you don't see it. There's a difference between saying, oh, hey, maybe you should just look into where they're at because like I was in touch with them I don't know. And even then one thing you say could be like totally like you didn't know what you were talking about and the person's not going to go out then because you said that.
Right.
But if there is a reason to believe that this is a terrible idea, there's a difference between saying I don't see it versus, oh, that person wants to live a cola life and
right.
You're not interested in that from what I understand. Like that's very different than just I don't see it.
Right.
I don't see it. Or I don't see it because we all think that person is going to end up with a certain type of personality. I mean, we all know people.
You're like this. They're like that.
They're like that. And you don't need to marry your Siamese twin. And you're probably better off not marrying your Siamese twin. And this whole, it's like we go on a date for them.
Right.
And I think that's where we get tripped up. The other thing I find, and I think this ties into something else, which is that relying too much on what other people think, where I think that it could get dangerous, by the way, is that then people don't use their own intuition as they get to know this person. Okay. I'll give you an example. Okay. And this month is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So this is very relevant with abusive relationships. Okay. Let's say, Karen, you went on a date with someone and the waiter comes over to your table and says, what do you guys want? And your date just answers and goes, the date says, I'm going to have a burger and fries and she's going to have a salad and Diet Coke. Okay. And you're sitting there like, okay, what just happened? Like,
right.
That's not what I want, or I think I can order myself, right? And you're sitting there, right? But like you don't want to like make a stand, right? So whatever. And then let's say you come home from the date and you call the matchmaker, or you call your committee, you call your high school, you call your high school teacher, you call your friend, whatever it is, and you tell them what happened, okay? And one of them says, oh, you know what? He must have been he got confused. He has a lot of sisters, and he probably just assumed like all women just order a salad and Diet Coke, right? And he's from such an awesome family. Like, it's so not weird. Like, what? You should totally go out again, right? Now, meanwhile, here's the thing. You were the one that was sitting on that date, okay? Something did not feel right. That was a weird behavior, okay? But the problem in our circles is that we don't necessarily empower singles by saying, hey, why don't you have a conversation with your date about this, right? So what would happen next? Your shadchan would talk to him and be like, she had a really great time, but she was like a little confused about the salad and Diet Coke thing. Like so it's like, they're going to work it out for you and come back and be like, I spoke to him. He got confused. Okay. As opposed to you either deciding for yourself, you know what, it was a very uncomfortable behavior and I don't want to go out with this person again because to me, there's something very off about that. Or even if you decided to go out again and you wanted to bring it up yourself and be like, hey, listen, it's been fun hanging out. I just wanted to maybe bring up what happened on the last date. I appreciate you wanting to order for me. I was just curious about it. Right. And that, by the way, is where you build or get a chance to see emotional compatibility, is how do we have the uncomfortable conversations with someone? And so what's happening now is couples are outsourcing that when they have conflicts or differences, they have people on the outside who are trying to talk about it for them.
I feel like that happens with marriages as well right now.
Yes, it happens with marriage. It happens with marriages as well, but that's not surprising, because if we're training couples while they're dating that this is how you build an intimate relationship, is having these people on the outside, which, by the way, for a married couple, no one on the outside could possibly fully understand what is going on inside a marriage.
Exactly.
And they're only hearing different sides of it, and everyone's got advice, and everyone's saying do this, and everyone's saying do that. And I look at it like GPS, like GPS is awesome, but if we only use GPS, we never learn our own sense of direction. And we don't take accountability for our choices. Like people will show up at a party and be like, oh, I'm sorry, my GPS got me lost.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, your GPS got you lost? No, you chose to listen to your GPS, and your GPS told you to turn right over there. And I think it's important with relationships that people have a sense of accountability for the choices that they make. I feel like I'm talking a lot.
No, that's, in this week's Parsha, it's all about personal accountability. We're in Parsha Bereshit. I mean, whenever I'm releasing this podcast, it's going to be maybe a few weeks after that.
Right.
But it's all about taking responsibility for your own choices and decisions.
Yeah.
And not constantly outsourcing all your
blaming,
issues.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I think one thing I wanted to also throw out there is that I think that one of the biggest issues we're having in our dating world for single adults. Okay. So, I mean, there's different pieces of this. There's the challenge of being in the dating world, and there's a challenge of being single in the Jewish community.
Right.
Meaning, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yes,
there's like the actual dating that's very stressful and has its specific challenges. But then there's also just like, what does it mean to be a single adult in the Jewish community?
So let's talk about that.
Okay.
Why don't we take this in that direction?
Yeah.
The challenges of being single in a Jewish community.
Okay.
Because we can, this is two completely different topics.
Yeah. I mean, they connect with each other, because I think that the stress of dating and the hopelessness that people can feel when they're dating is very discouraging for people in terms of looking to the future of, hey, I don't really have a community I fit into because I'm single, but I'm hopeful that I'll find someone. But if the dating world feels very like not productive for you and very like demeaning for you, then you really feel stuck.
Right.
But do you want to talk specifically about religious Jewish communities or just Jewish communities in general?
Jewish communities in general, because I think my audience is a mix of Orthodox, traditional Jews. I mean, I have lots of Persian Jews who are listening to my podcast. It's a completely different culture,
right.
But, just in general.
Right. So in terms of like the experience of being a single adult, so I think that it varies based on community. There are certain communities where it's very common it's not just common, it's standard to live in your parents' house until you get married in certain communities. And then there are other communities where people are like, why are they still living at home?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like failure to launch, like why haven't you moved out yet? Like what's going on? Why are they rotting in the basement? So it's like, it really depends on families and, what's normal for that circle.
Right.
But I do find that generally speaking, our communities are family oriented.
Yeah.
So if you are a single Jewish adult and you would like to have a family and you don't have a family, there's very few places where you might find a Jewish community that you feel included or seen.
Right.
Because the issue I find here is not just about the crisis of singles. It's like I find it's a crisis of belonging. In other words, if you're a single Jewish adult and you want to find a community to belong to, but Jewish communities are generally family oriented and programming is generally family oriented. Our holidays are family oriented and children oriented.
Unless, there's singles who decide that they want to move to Manhattan when they're a certain age, because they find that there's lots of communities there.
Yeah. Yeah, you go to, Upper West Side, Washington Heights, Crown Heights. I mean,
Exactly.
there's definitely Queens. There's definitely pockets.
Right. But what people say about that is that when people move to those types of places, they feel like they kind of never want to get married because there's no pressure there. That's what you hear about when people move to the city, that people don't really want to get married when they move there because they're having so much fun and it's exciting.
So I
You know,
know. So I know people say that. I know people say that. I mean, my practice on Upper West Side, I have plenty of, I see kind of the culture now. I'm on Zoom. I could listen. Are there people that enjoy, the independence in the city for sure? But I really do find that for the vast majority, they don't love having to sign a new lease every year and figure out roommates every year. In terms of getting too comfortable, I think that, I
I
don't know,
think
I
that's
could
a
be
myth.
wrong, but I think that to be honestly, I think that sentiment is said by people who haven't really experienced being a single Jewish adult who wants to have a family and hasn't been able to make that
Yes.
happen. And yes, by the way, there are people that are having children without meeting a partner. There are ways that you can have a Jewish family without meeting a partner. And there are definitely more people today who are considering that, especially women in their mid to late 30s who would like to have children and they haven't met a partner yet. So they're starting to explore their options to have a child by themselves. But for many women, that was not their initial plan. So it's, for some people, that could be a difficult decision for them to make of, I really want to be a mother, but I don't want to keep waiting. But like, when is the time to make that decision? And it's a very unique personal thing. And obviously it's cultural. In certain cultures, that's becoming more normal. Others, it's not as common. But I don't agree with that sentiment necessarily, that people are moving to the West Side and they're just having too much fun, that
Yeah. Yeah.
they just don't want to get married.
Yeah. By
I
the way, that
think
was not
that
my opinion. This
people,
is what you hear.
I know, I don't,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't think it was your opinion. I think that there are people who, I think the majority of them want to find love, want to settle down. I think it gets old. Maybe in the beginning it can be exciting, to have your own place and your own independence. But I think that for many people, it's very painful to constantly feel, listen, it's also painful to feel like you have to live in a community because you're single, and that's just where the singles can live.
Right.
Like,
Right.
there are people who don't really want to live in the city.
Yeah.
There are people whose jobs, it does not make sense for them geographically to live in the city,
Yeah.
but they don't want to move to a random, to a suburb.
Right.
So, and this is
Rachel,
where, yeah,
wait. Continue what you were going to say. I wanted to just ask you a question about something you said before, but continue what you were
yeah,
going to say.
this is where I think, like, the question that we can ask ourselves is kind of, in our suburbs, meaning what comes first? Are our suburbs not singles friendly because singles don't live there? In other words, are singles moving to the city because the suburbs aren't family friendly?
Mm.
Are our suburbs not are not singles friendly, or are suburbs not single friendly because the singles just aren't sticking around? Meaning, but I think that
Mhm.
our institutions need to ask themselves. Like, one of the things I always say is, like, any shul or school, whatever, like, even membership fees, event fees, right? Is there a membership option for a single adult, or is it only family, right? Can you go to your shul dinner by yourself? Does it have to be a couple, right? Like, these are things, even minyanim in a shul. I went to a shul once where they had and this was before the pandemic, they had so many minyanim on Shabbos morning, and there was main shul, basement, all these different, and then they had a high school minyan, a college minyan, and then after the college minyan was young couples minyan. And I was just thinking, like, what message does that send to someone? is you have a minion in college, and then
They don't have a young adults minion?
it was not called young adults minion.
Because in my
You
community,
guys have that, right?
We
You
have it,
that.
yeah. We have a huge
Right, you
singles
have
minion.
that. Right.
Yeah.
Which I think is amazing. And then you have like a kiddish after and everyone stands around and socializes, right?
Yes,
Like, I
but
feel
it's
like I went
really
to Disney when I
mostly
was little.
from one age to another. Yeah, we'd love for you to come.
Right. Which is great because then you have a window of people and people know that like they can go to shul and there's a place where they can feel like people aren't looking at them and being like, what's her story? You know what I mean?
But then once they're past that age, well, then where do they go? That's
right.
what I'm saying. Whatever age that is, that's when I see that couple, young adults are saying, you know what? Maybe I'll move into the city now because I'll feel more accepted there at this age in a young adult minion, as opposed to here.
Right.
So
and which that also speaks to just for the adults in the Jewish community to ask ourselves, could we do more to make our institutions more inclusive and sensitive? And by the way, I'm not just talking about single adults who are, let's say, 23 and never married. We have people who are divorced. We have people who are widowed. We have single parents. We have a lot of different family situations. And I think that we can dig deep in terms of asking ourselves, do our websites for our institutions reflect diversity in that way? Right. And I think that single adults would feel more comfortable staying in suburbs if they felt like the institutions saw them. And then I hear some people involved in community organizing saying, well, the singles aren't getting involved. Like, so if they would get involved, blah, 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 but like what comes first? Right. And I do think that our community tends to put marriage on a pedestal.
Yes, 100%.
Various ways. I mean, I acknowledge for me as a married woman that I carry a certain amount of privilege that as a speaker in the speaking circuit, I find that in the Jewish community, who are the scholars in residence, right? I think we have amazingly talented people in our communities who know so much about so many things. Okay, they may not be married. Why aren't these people getting opportunities to showcase what they know the way other people might be invited to communities? You said you had a question about something I said.
Yeah, well, I have so many questions. I have one right now, and then I'll get back to that. I actually had a single girl a few years ago tell me.
A single girl or a single woman?
Sorry, woman. We'll talk about that.
I'm just having fun with you.
No. We're going to talk about that too. A single woman come up to me and say, Karen, I have all this knowledge about Torah, and I'm so inspired to do speaking and give Torah classes, but I just don't feel comfortable because I don't feel accepted. I don't feel like people are going to respect me. Like, who are you? Like, you're not a Mrs. You're just a Miss. So that really that made me sad. It made me sad, but.
Which is so sad because when you think about that, she has a talent and she could teach Torah and.
Like, she doesn't feel comfortable teaching Torah to married women, but she feels more comfortable teaching Torah to young children or little girls,
Right.
But
which
not
to me is so fascinating because when you think about that in other topics, would you go to a yoga class only if the yoga teacher had was married?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. What?
It doesn't say anything about her, her professional value or
would you only go to a dentist who's married? Meaning. No, and I get it because people are like, well, this is Torah. Okay, but why can't you be really knowledgeable? And this is what I think is so unfortunate is that this is where we are infantilizing single Jewish adults.
Mm-hmm. When I just said girls.
No, and again, I mean, part of it is I actually asked a group once, about that. And there were women who said, well, I don't want to be called a single woman because it sounds old.
Right.
So like, you know, if I'm going out with my friends, I'm not like, oh, I'm going out with the women, like
Right,
going out with the
exactly.
girls. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, I was like kidding around with you. I know I like called you out on it, but you know, but you know, it is weird when someone is 40 and they're single and we're still calling her a girl. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
But I think one of the issues I see that comes up is that, and we like mentioned this before, is the events that we have in our communities. In terms of, we talked about institutions being inclusive and sensitive.
When you speak about institutions,
yes.
Can you just name a few institutions that need to be sensitive towards single people's needs?
I'm going to give an example.
Yeah.
Okay. So as someone in the speaking circuit, I changed my policy in the last year or two that I will not speak at an event where the event is only for married women. So, because in the past I spoke,
wow.
in the past I spoke at events that were about relationships and sexual functioning and marriage, and it was for married women. And I got to this point where I had this awareness, and I said, I'm part of the problem. Because why shouldn't single adult women have access to events about marriage? So instead, we're telling them, no, we don't want you to become educated about marriage before. We're going to wait till right before you get married, where you take 5 or 10 college classes, okay, where it's like super rushed and under a lot of pressure. And let's also remind ourselves, not everyone is going to take college classes. And I was like, okay, so instead of us like educating and preparing people for marriage and giving them relationship education, we're like, no, we're going to wait till you're married and then you'll start learning. And I said, what does that feel like to be a single Jewish adult and you see on an event flyer that you're not allowed to come because you don't have a ring on your finger? There's no Torah source for that. There's no Torah source for that. Why should a 19-year-old woman be allowed to go to a shir on Nida because she has a ring on her finger, but then you could have a 35-year-old woman who's a nurse or who's an OBGYN even, and she can't go to that shir on Nida because she doesn't have a ring on her finger? How does that make sense?
I never thought of it that way.
Right?
Never thought of it that way.
Besides the fact that it sends this message, besides the fact that the PR is deeply hurtful, it's very hurtful to people who are single. It puts marriage in this like VIP club.
Right.
Of like, oh, it's just for the marrieds, right? Because like the married people don't want singles to know that marriage isn't perfect. Right.
Or I also find that married people don't want singles there because they don't want them to feel bad.
Sometimes it's that they don't want them to feel, but I think sometimes it's because they feel vulnerable when it comes to singles knowing that like this whole marriage thing is not so perfect.
That's interesting that you say that, because I've had singles tell me that they really don't like it when married people like talk about all their dirty laundry in their marriages. Like they don't want to know about all this stuff in their marriages. They want to have this like picture perfect idea of marriage. So
and I think that's like a whole so I think there's like that, and I think that it's not black and white, and like you said, I think there's a lot of nuance, but I think that these events that are specifically about nida and taharat mishpacha and marriage, that we don't allow single adults to go to. And what we're doing is we're telling them, no, you can't get educated. We don't trust you, or we don't think it's appropriate for you to sit for this. So instead, we want marriage to be a bad surprise party, and then we'll do damage control. In other words, like, we're not going to try to prepare you when things are calmer. Like, even, and this might sound radical, but I've been thinking about this lately. Like, imagine if people took kala classes or chatan classes in college. Like, when they're 21 or whatever, they spend a few months learning with someone, before they even, let's say, are engaged to anyone. They're not even in the committed relationship yet. They just learn about, these ideas of marriage. They learn the halachas, and now they have this body of knowledge. Okay.
But Hatan and Kala teacher will teach a single person when they have so many other.
Hey, let me tell you something. When a person's engaged, they're not married yet either. So what are we so afraid of? When you think about it, if people were to take college classes, let's say in college, learn a few times, first of all, I think that it makes the learning much more meaningful because it's not a rush job. They're not under the gun because the wedding's in 3 weeks. They're not balancing the learning with also picking out the flowers and fighting about the tablecloth, whatever it is. But I also think it's important because I think that in the Jewish world, the laws of mikvah and the laws of taharat mishpacha can really vary about how people plan to practice them. And I think that it's a really important conversation for couples when they're dating, because they may not exactly be on the same page, but if they're really not on the same page, they may not know that if they haven't even learned the halachas yet, or halachot, as you would say in your community, right? Yeah. So then they each are learning while they're engaged, and they're already committed to each other, but have all these, right? Think about it. Like imagine if during, right? And I'll tell you another reason why I think it's important for people to learn, why I think people should learn about it. First of all, there's no rule that says you can only learn these laws until you get married.
Right.
There's no rule that says that.
Right.
Right? There's no rule that says that. And I'll tell you why I think it's important also. Because let's say you have a couple that's planning to keep the laws of mikvah and planning to keep the laws of nida and not be sexually active during that time. Okay? Now, if neither of them really learned those laws, and they only learn those laws once they're engaged, okay? Let me ask you a question. If you learn those laws before you start dating, when you're sitting on a date with someone and you're getting to know them, that's going to play a role in how you evaluate your relationship. Because you're going to ask yourself, not just, are you attracted to this person? Do you like the same things? Do you have the same values? But also to ask yourself, does this seem like someone that you can communicate with and articulate your feelings to each other, given that you are planning to keep these laws that will require you to be able to verbally communicate, especially during certain times where you can't communicate in other ways physically, right? And I think that could be an important part of getting to know someone. But if you don't know the rules because we're infantilizing you and not teaching you these rules, so it's already a done deal and you have a ring on your finger, right? And then you just have the engagement time is so much more stressful.
100%.
But again, this all piles on. But this all piles on to what we're saying before of this infantilizing thing of like, oh, we're not going to let single adults come to these events. It's only for married people. So I took that on myself, where I said, from now on, I will not do events that have that rule. And I have had events that I said no to because of that. They were not willing to negotiate that. I said, listen, you're in charge of the event. I respect that that's your choice to make. I'm not comfortable coming on those terms. I think we have a real problem in our community in relationships, in education of relationships. And I think that we need to start being more inclusive of single adults, that there's no reason why they can't sit in this lecture. No reason why. But I've also had other wonderful experiences where I explained how I felt about it. And they said, you know what? I never thought of it that way. You're right. We're going to change the event flyer and it's going to be open for, people, let's say age, instead of saying it's only married women, they'll say, let's say 17, ages 18 and up, like they don't want a ninth grade kid coming, but let's say college and up.
Right. I really never thought of it that way either. This is really one of the first times I'm hearing of this revolutionary idea for the Jewish community. I mean, in my community, we have events and we have for married couples, for married women only, for singles.
Right.
Everything is divided into categories. You know,
Right.
what you're saying is very, very open-minded, and it's very inclusive. And I love the fact that people can learn from an earlier age, not an earlier age, but
Yes.
way before they're
A
married,
young,
because
yeah.
as you said, it's too rushed when they're engaged. They're thinking about so many different things. I see it now, especially in this pandemic. You know, I have Kalas like
Right.
on top of the wedding planning that they're doing. Is my wedding going to
Right.
get shut down by the fire marshal? Where am I going to do my wedding in the middle of
Right.
November with 50 people? It's
Right.
so much added stress. And on top of that, they have to
Right.
learn all these laws and they have no idea. Wow.
Right.
You really made me think about
Right.
that.
And we can prevent that. But I think it needs us, like, I was about to say zoom out, but like I like get a little nauseous when I say the word zoom,
And I know,
because
right?
it's like we talk about it so much. But like this kind of bigger picture of how do we conceptualize single adults in the Jewish community? And do we look at them as people that we either need to fix or fix up? Right? We need to accept the fact that there are people in the Jewish community who are never going to get married, and that could be by choice or not by choice.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're only going, if Jewish communities are only going to look at single adults as we need to make events for them that are all about meeting other singles.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
That's
what it's all
not
focused
inclusive.
on.
That's basically saying our agenda for you as a community is just that you guys should get married, but we're not allowing you guys to come to our other events because you're not married.
Exactly. Bingo.
Right? And then we wonder why they don't want to get involved in the community.
Or we wonder why they get annoyed when we are constantly messaging them, hey, are you going to come to this cruise? Hey, are you going to come on this trip? Come to this party.
Or how about this? Or then we wonder why they want to leave the Jewish community and feel just really turned off and feel like the system failed them.
Or the community that they're a part of, or join another community instead, another Jewish community. Right.
Right. Exactly. Right. Why are we can't be surprised by that if we're not creating more of a cushion and inclusivity. And I think that our events communicate that in terms of, you know, and it's little things also. I think that people feel like it's okay to ask single adults all these personal questions.
Oh, yeah.
That it's like fair game, you know?
Yeah.
How's your love life, right? Like
Exactly.
it's totally okay. It's totally okay.
I mean, I'll admit, I used to do that quite often. You know,
right.
I was newly married and I wanted to help other people get married because, you know, in my community, I got married at a quote unquote old age. I was 26, chas v'shalom, very. And we were talking about it, you know, the older you are.
Right.
Oh my God, what do we say? The like more.
I joked. I said, the older you are, the more O's there are when they say, I'm so happy for you.
Yeah.
In all your text messages that say, I'm so happy for you. Like, however old you are, that's how many O's you get.
Yeah, I got like 26 O's, let's just say. But anyway, I was, you know, I was newly married and I was very excited to help other people get married because, you know, marriage is the most important thing in a Jewish community, family life.
Right.
And I used to ask people, how's dating life? Until it dawned on me that it's a really annoying question. And it's actually, frankly, none of my business.
Right.
And yeah, I don't want to be that person. But at the same time, I genuinely wanted to help. I wanted to help people. So what can you suggest for, you know, people to do to help their single friends and acquaintances? What tips do you have?
So I think first of all, I think that people, you know, everyone's unique in terms of what they're comfortable with and what they need. So to say like, this is how you should like all deal with all your friends who are single, like it really varies. I think that a couple of things. I think so one thing, and we talked about this, is that one of the things that could be difficult is when, let's say, you've tried to set up your single friends, but it didn't pan out. In other words, the other person didn't say yes, or or just the idea was just an idea and it wasn't able to happen. And then it's like, do you tell your friends and say, hey, I want to let you know I tried, but the other person said no, or I tried, but the other person's busy? Like, that's something that, like, sometimes friends actually need to, like, ask each other, like, hey, I just want you to know you're on my radar. I always am thinking of how I can try to help and set you up. As you know, the dating scene is really rough, and, you know, a lot of it's timing and this and that. Do you want to know when I try, like, if I try to set you up with someone and they never get back to me, or they say no, do you want me to tell you just so you at least know that I tried? Or would you rather that I only tell you when I actually have someone who said yes and is ready to go out with you? Like, we just need to ask people, like, how can I be most helpful to you? How can I be most helpful to you? Okay.
I love that.
When a friend calls you, let's say, to talk about a date she went on, so you can say to your friend, hey, you know, what role do you want me to play in this conversation? Do you want me to listen? Do you want me to just listen? Or did you want feedback? Because sometimes people don't want feedback. They just want to, like, vent to you about the date. Or they don't want you to say, hey, maybe you should be open-minded, or you never know. Or, like, my friend's grandma, like, that's what happened for her when she was dating. Like, they may not want to hear that right now. Sometimes people want to hear a message of chizuk and encouragement. Sometimes they really don't. And you know how we could find out? Ask them.
Right. Ask them before you tell them.
Or just say, you know, did you want to hear any feedback? Or, you know, I heard an inspiring idea recently. Like, are you up for it right now, or is now not a good time? Like, meaning, just ask permission before we dump ideas on people. We just assume, like, oh yeah, you want to hear this, like, great, you know, this great platitude. I mean, we talked about this, like, all these platitudes and these expressions, and you know, it's not helpful for people. I find for many people it's not helpful. I mean, I shouldn't. There are some people that it's very helpful, but
you're
sometimes
so
it's
special, Miss. That's why Mr. Wright's not here, because you're
right.
so special.
You're single because you're so special,
right?
Or even just this idea of, like, blaming people for their predicament. You know,
right?
That,
you're too picky.
They're single because of that they're single because of something they're doing. And listen, is it possible that there might be something that they could work on? For sure. But there also is always that option that they just haven't met a compatible partner yet.
Right.
We get married young, so people can seem over the hill at a pretty young age, even though, like, and you know what? Not everyone's ready to get married young. That's another piece, by the way, that I think is an issue. This idea of, like, ready or not, here I date. Like, we need to give permission for people to, like, understand that, like, not everyone needs to date at the same time.
Right, exactly.
And dating breaks are really important also. I mean, especially dating could be traumatic. You could have a breakup could be incredibly traumatic.
Which you speak about a lot also on your page.
Breakups could be very traumatic for people, and the decisions they make subsequently with other relationships. You know, think about it like this, Karen. If you have a group that's hiking a mountain and they're starting up a trail at the same time, they're still going to all stop for water breaks at different points. They're going to need water breaks at different points, okay? Because we're all different, okay? When we're dating, and the dating world, it's rough, okay? People need to take rest stops at different points to nourish themselves, and we need to give people permission to take a break from dating if they need.
Yeah.
But we're so scared that, like, people are going to get scooped up.
Yeah.
So, you know, so you'll have someone who, let's say they have a very traumatic breakup in August, and a part of them is like, I really should maybe sit this out for a few months, maybe go to therapy, process this trauma. But everyone is just like, you got to get back out there away. Get back on the horse right away. And
he's a great guy. You don't want to lose this opportunity.
Right. Or just you'll fall in love with the next girl. So don't worry. And it's like, I don't know about that. Like, maybe that's not really what they need right now. And also, is that fair for the person they're going out with? Like, next, like, are we,
Right.
and again, this idea that like, when are you 100% perfectly ready and healed? You know, everyone has stuff, but do we give people permission to say, hey, you know what, maybe I need to like take a break. I've gotten kind of mangled in this process. Like, maybe I need to take a break. Maybe it would be helpful if I take a break. Do we give people permission to be intuitive about what they might need? Right?
Intuitive is the name of the game. Right.
Right. And that's, I think, part of adulting. Part of adulting is people being able to learn how to make decisions themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Rachel, you know, this whole conversation that we're just talking about how other people should be bringing up conversations about dating and asking for permission. It reminded me of the question I had in the beginning of our interview about what do you feel about single girls or women discussing their dating life with each other? Okay, because some people are against it because they think that if one single girl's dating a guy and she's telling all her girlfriends about this guy, his strengths and weaknesses and what he did and what he didn't do, and then they break up, and let's say one of her friends likes that guy, she's saying, I don't see it, like you said, because she knows, quote unquote, everything about him because her friend dated him. So what do you think about single women talking to each other about their dating life and their relationships with each other?
So it's a really good question. I think a couple of things. First of all, it's hard because your friends, like, you need your friends, right? Sometimes it's easier to talk to your friends about your dating life than it is to talk to your family members, right? It's like you go on a good date and you tell your friend about it. She's like hopefully happy for you. You go home, you go on a good date, you tell your mom or your grandma about it, and they're already like, okay, what color is the wedding, right? So like you need your friends. And a lot of people have, I like to call it their dating committee. And so I always ask people, who's on your committee? Who are the people that you bounce your ideas off of, who you get your barometer for what's normal? Now, if your committee can fill up a school bus, your committee is too large. Okay. Maybe a church van is more appropriate. And I look at it like your committee, fine. You could have a few trustees. In other words, like, to learn kind of who can I share what with? Who are the people that I can turn to for advice about this kinds of thing? Or who are the people I could talk to about that kind of things? Who are the people who could be happy for me? You know, there's that expression, a friend in need is a friend indeed.
Yes.
So I heard of this idea that it's actually like the opposite of that. Because think about it. When your friend is down in the dumps, it's easy to go run and, you know, oh, I'm going to go save the day. I'm going to get them their favorite snack. And you show up and sit next to them while they're, you know, boohoo, right? But what happens when your friend calls you with really great news? Because they just got this job and it's the same kind of job that you want to get, that you didn't get, right? What is like a real measure of friendship where you could be really happy for them, despite the fact that you might
you're hurting
be
inside,
upset that you're hurting. And I find that in the dating world, what's very hard is that it could be really painful when you're single if you're looking to get married. And sometimes I find it could be hard for people to be happy for their friends. I don't think it's conscious. I don't think it's intentional. It's not like, oh, hey, I want to sabotage my friend's happiness.
Yeah.
But I think that when someone's dating someone and they're telling their friends about it and their friends are upset, or it's not even just that, you know, for a lot of people, they're nervous that they're going to be the last one left. So if their friends are getting married before them and there's no one left. So, you know, I think people need to kind of reflect and realize, like, what are the strengths that my friends have and in what ways can they be there for me? Who are the friends that I can talk to about certain things? Who are the friends that maybe it's harder for them to talk about, you know, certain things? You know, and I think you bring up a good point in terms of like the analyzing of like, oh, like, did he do this or did he do that? You know, like, at the end of the day, when you're looking for a partner, there are people in your life that can have advice for you and make suggestions, but it's going to have to be a decision that you take accountability for and that you're making a choice for. And it can't just be because everyone loves this person, everyone's telling you they're amazing, whatever, blah, blah, blah. What everyone thinks about this person versus what it's like for you to be in a relationship with this person is a different story. And on the other extreme, I don't think it's necessarily smart if you're not talking to anyone about the relationship and it's all inside and there's no one you're bouncing things off of, because I think sometimes people will make certain decisions, or it's easy to rationalize certain things or whatever it is. Listen, if you have someone who's usually like very like open and excited about being in a relationship, and now they're in a relationship where it's like super top secret and like no one can know, and they don't want to be seen with this person in public, like that to me is, and this is obviously a whole other podcast about like red flags and concerns, but like I said, I think friends are important, and you just over time have to ask yourself like which friends provide what you need for different types of advice, and to understand that, even really healthy people who love you can struggle if you are happy and it's something that they're waiting for too.
Right. Beautiful. I also think with listening to a friend talk about her dating life, let's say you have feelings towards a guy that she just went on a date with and you don't know how it's going to end up. That puts someone in a very conflicting position, because they're like, I don't know if I want to hear everything that's going on, because I also have feelings for this guy. So it's complicated. Would you suggest for that person to maybe put some boundaries if they don't want to hear it?
Does the friend know that the friend has a crush on the person they're dating?
No, because I find that they don't really talk about that. It's like, it's kind of like a secret. So it's complicated,
Right. I'm trying to like understand the situation. I mean, I think.
No, because, I'm from a community where there's not so many people. Everybody knows everybody.
Okay.
So
everybody knows everyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not like a huge pool of people to pick from. So like, there's always going to be bound to be someone, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Sorry to throw that on you. I mean, I don't know if you have the answer, but just something that people could think about.
I would have like more follow-up questions about your community before I would answer that.
Right.
Because I think like, but I think, like I said, overall, I think it's important to have friends and people we could talk to. I will say this, something very interesting. When it comes to our professional lives, and I think this could be like a good point for us to kind of wind it down with. When it comes to our professional lives, we tend to recognize the value of mentors who are further down the line, who are 10 years older, 15, 20, who are like more advanced in their careers. And we talk to them, or we want to brainstorm, or my favorite expression when people say, I want to pick your brain. Especially when they say, I want to pick your brain for 5 minutes. And I'm like, never in history has someone been able to pick someone's brain for 5 minutes. Picking a brain is a 45-minute thing, just saying. But we recognize the value of having mentors who are 10, 15, 20 years older than us. But what's interesting is that, do we have that same value for personal mentors? In other words, are we calling to get advice from someone who's 5 minutes older than us? And this is the person that we're going to ask advice from in terms of as a friendship thing. I'm not talking about like clinical stuff. I'm not talking about doctors, dentists, therapists, like, that people are trained with modalities about how to treat issues. I'm talking about friendships. Okay. The idea of what it means to have mentors or friends who are older than you, who have more experience, more perspective, that could bring a different kind of perspective on things than talking to your friends who are exactly the same age as you, who might be interested in exactly the same people. And they're just trying to figure it out too.
Right.
They're also just trying to figure it out. But this speaks to a larger question, in which is, in our communities, our mingling, right? We talk about everyone, we have these little boxes of these people are here and these people are there. Imagine if we had more integration, and not just integration of married people and single people, but integration of ages, right? Of us valuing the wisdom of people who are further ahead in life, who have been through different things. And some of the things we're going through, they've probably been through, right? So that would be my answer here, is like, to kind of like think bigger we need to think bigger as a community, of the way we connect with each other, of the way we relate to each other, the way we think we can strengthen each other. It means really looking at ourselves and saying, what are the barriers here that people don't feel more of a sense of belonging in their communities? And that might be because they're single. It might be because they're stuck with their own age group. But imagine if those barriers weren't there as much, our communities could be such a more loving cushion for people as a place of
100%.
belonging.
Wow, Rachel, you gave me really so much to think about. And I think I picked your brain, not just for 5 minutes. I don't know how long we were going for, but
exactly. I'm like, right. I'm not against picking a brain, but like, we just like, let's call a spade a spade. It's not going to be 5 minutes. Like,
no.
Never in history did that. It just doesn't happen. So yeah,
well,
but we planned this out.
Yes. And
I'm saying for everyone watching, a lot of this is spontaneous, but I'm saying we planned this out, that we planned out we're going to have a pick your brain conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rachel, I have one last question for you, because we are running out of time. First of all, I learned so much from you, and your last message really, really stuck with me and really inspired me. And it's going to make me think about different ways I can change the way I go about doing things for my community, for me to be more inclusive and to think bigger and not just think in categories. And I really believe with what you said, that if we're more inclusive and, age is not age is not a thing, status is not a thing, the community can be a loving cushion, as you said, for so many people, something that they can rely on, as opposed to searching elsewhere. You have it right there for you. So my last question is can you discuss some ways institutions can be more inclusive of singles? Besides, like making events that are not, let's say, about like, get married, like just
well,
go
I think
and get
like
married.
that, right? I think events, right? If we what we're saying about thinking bigger and take away the barriers, so events no longer being just married people, or event admission being only couples, or sometimes, this is terrible, they'll do event admissions where they'll have an individual, but it's more than half of what it is for couples. Like they'll have shul membership where maybe they have individual, but it's like more than half of what it is for a couple. Which that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Okay. Shul dinners, which, by the way, you should do individual admission option, because you have some couples where one parent is staying home with the kids, or one parent is in avelos. Like, why does it have to be per couple? Why? Right? So I think even just like looking at events, admissions, even just who gets invited to speak in shul, the scholars in residence, okay, the speakers, right? Is, even when shuls do like a cooking demo in someone's house, right? Like, are they always married people? Now, listen, it's possible that some of those people happen to be married, but kind of thinking bigger of talent. Do we celebrate and recognize talent only of married people?
Right.
I think it would be helpful if we also looked at our minyanim in terms of our setup of our shuls. I think our schools sometimes are paying married teachers more than they're paying single teachers. And that's incredibly painful for people to find out.
Wow.
in terms of that piece.
Yeah.
Think even in terms of sometimes in certain communities, there's an assumption that people who are single have so much more time on their hands. So therefore, if they are going to be involved in community stuff, to dump things on that person because, oh yeah, they're single. Like, let's just give it to them. Like, send them to Costco, right?
Wow.
Like,
Yeah.
even thinking about that, this kind of assumption in that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it also, I'm trying to think some other stuff would be helpful.
I mean, education with what you said, about 20 minutes ago, it's about providing classes for college age students. That really
Yeah.
was like groundbreaking for me. I never really thought about that, to provide, Tarat HaMishpacha classes for college age students.
Yeah.
Why start when they're
Why do we
engaged?
start? Why do
Why?
we start when it's a done deal and they're super stressed out?
Yeah, I love that.
And this way, then it's just you're showing people that we're not going to start ignoring you or putting you in a penalty box because you're single. You're still very much part of our community. You could still sit with your friends at events, right? And by the way, and again, the goal of inclusion at events in the community is not because, oh, then all the singles will get married. They may not. But when you think about it, though, if they are interacting more with the community, what do you think is going to happen?
Right. More people will get to know them.
Also, out of sight, out of mind, right? So
Yeah.
if people don't see you around, they're not going to think of the idea, right? So if you are around, but again, this is not it's an ends in it of itself that we need to have more inclusion for events, but it also could be a means for people to meet more. But it's really about thinking bigger of like, how can we make a community where people don't feel like, oh, if I'm not married, then do I have a place here?
Well, Bezrat Hashem, I hope that we can reach a point in our lives very, very soon that we're going to have all these events and the community can come together in person, get to see each other, all ages, all statuses, inclusivity, and Bezrat Hashem, we should see a lot of happiness and success and growth in our communities. Rachel, thank you so much for being here and dedicating your time and your expertise to this very, very important subject. Can you tell the listeners where they can find you?
Okay. So you can find me on Instagram at Rachel Hercman. And you can also, you might appreciate checking out the Layers Project magazine. You can find the Layers Project, which I didn't really talk about tonight, but I do want to mention that because in terms of time. But in terms of the Layers Project, something we are really proud of is that for us, we don't discriminate about our writers. We have beautiful, amazing essays from women who are married, not married, have children, don't have children, and just we find that we've been able to build community by removing that barrier and showing that all women's experiences matter. And certainly that being married does not mean you're not going to have suffering in life. So there isn't a VIP club by being married. And I think in terms of really leveling the playing field. So the Layers Project magazine, you could find the Layers Project magazine on Facebook and also on Instagram.
They have a group, right? Where people can send anonymous.
Yeah. I mean, if you go to the page for the Layers Project magazine, you could see where you could join. We have our own private Facebook group. At this point, there's I think almost 10,000 members. I'm not sure exactly how many. Who's counting? And then, you can message us on Instagram, but even just, I think in terms of creating more voices.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Rachel, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. This was fun.
This was so much fun and really, really taught me so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.